Welcome to the Storypowers Podcast, the show about the power of stories, the people who tell them, and why you should be doing it too. I'm your host, Francisco Mahfuz. My guest today is Jay Abbasi. After years of developing training programs for billion-dollar companies like Tesla and SolarCity, Jay lost a loved one and saw his life fall into pieces. He found his way out through mindfulness. Now he's a storyteller, speaker, and consultant, bringing mindfulness training to major companies as a way to lower costs, reduce stress, and increase productivity. Jay is also a health nut who dislikes avocados, but I have a feeling he's doing that just to be controversial. If you like the show, please leave us an iTunes review and subscribe. It really helps other people find us. If you don't want to do it for me, that's fine. Just do it for the karma points. You can never have too many of those. Ladies and gentlemen, Jay Abbasi. Grant, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Francisco. I appreciate you letting me be here. Very, very kind and generous introduction.
I must say, though, that I am upset with you, Grant.
Uh-oh.
I'm upset with you and your friend Brad.
Okay.
Because I've read your book not that long ago, but for some reason, that line when you say, you know, who is this guy? I haven't been to your wedding. You haven't been my roommate in college unless you're Brad. Hi, Brad. For some reason, that is one of the lines that's stuck in my head, and it just keeps popping out at random times.
That's funny. Yeah, Brad was a good buddy all through high school. We were college roommates for a little while. Still keep in touch to this day, and so we gave him a little random shout out in the book there, I guess.
It's that line and something about getting a puppy. Those guys are adorable. So, I mean, I think it will fade after a while, but now every time I hear puppies, I think those guys are adorable.
That's funny.
But it's not that. I mean, one other line from the book that is very good and a bit more to the point of what we're talking about is that speakers should be a steakhouse and not a buffet.
Yeah.
So can you just talk about that for a second?
Yeah, it's one of the most important parts of the speaking process is getting clear on who you speak to and what's the problem that you solve. So for a lot of people who are interested in speaking, we just enjoy speaking. Speaking's a lot of fun, and so we just want to do it. We really enjoy it. And so who do we speak to? I don't know. We speak to anybody. We speak to everybody, right? And what do we speak about? I don't know. What do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. I can speak about, leadership or motivation or faith or family or marriage or customer service or sales or marketing. It's just like on and on and on and on. And that just is a horribly ineffective way to run a business, and especially to be a speaker. And so what we say is you want to be the steakhouse and not the buffet. And what we mean by that is, Francisco, if you and I were looking for a good steak, we have a choice. Like we could go to a buffet where steak is one of 100 different things that they offer, and they're all mediocre. Or you could go to a steakhouse where they do one thing, but they do that one thing really, really well. So they don't do lasagna, they don't do tacos, they don't do pasta, they don't do cupcakes. They do steak, and that's it. And so by doing one thing, by focusing on one thing, they are able to attract the right type of customers, but also repel the wrong type of customers. And so a steakhouse isn't trying to appeal to everyone. They say, we do this. And so if you're looking for tacos, there's a great place down the road. If you're looking for pasta, you should go over there. But if you're looking for steak, then we're the best. That is what we do. And so it's difficult for speakers to do that because, again, we tend to gravitate toward more of a buffet mentality of, but I want to speak on a whole bunch of things, and I want to speak to a whole bunch of different types of people. And so, again, it's counterintuitive, but the more narrow, the more clear, the more focused you are, the easier it is to actually find and book speaking gigs.
I think there's also a certain, you could call it overconfidence, you could call it arrogance, of this idea that we are good at speaking about anything. Oh, we're great speakers. Give me any topic. I can be sensible about it. I can give great advice and wisdom. And it is true that we can sound like we know what we're talking about with most topics, but I think a lot of speakers, and I'm not putting myself out of that, we tend to perhaps think that we could easily deliver, an hour-long keynote on whatever you asked us to speak about, which might be slightly over-egging our ability to deliver good content.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Is just because you know something about all those topics, just because you are interested in all those topics, just because maybe you're even passionate about all those topics, doesn't mean you should try to position yourself as such. So one of the most difficult things for a speaker and just any entrepreneur in general is to stay in your lane and to stay focused. So I'll give you an example. I remember, so the company that we run is called the Speaker Lab, and we teach speakers how to find and book speaking gigs. And so with the new book and with some of the experience I have with books and publishing. I had someone a student who reached out and said, hey, you run the speaker lab. You should also create the author lab. A lot of people who are interested in speaking are also interested in writing books. And on one hand, you're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But on the other hand, it's like every other thing that you try to do just waters down the core thing that you're good at. I said, no, we do this and we're really, really good at that. So another way to think about this would be, let's imagine, God forbid, that you had to have brain surgery, right? And you have a choice. Like you could go to like your local family medical doctor, and they are a doctor. They went to medical school. They've probably done some surgeries before. They probably know more about the brain than you or I do. They're a very knowledgeable person, but they've never done brain surgery. Or you can go to a brain surgeon where that's all they do day in and day out. If you have a broken arm, you're probably not going to them. If you've got a bad cough, you're probably not going to them. But if you got a big brain issue and you need them to take a look at it, that's probably who you want to look at it, right? Versus if you go to your family doctor and they're like, well, I've never done brain surgery, but I'm a doctor. I don't know. I'll give it a shot. I can figure it out. Like you don't want that person cutting you open. You don't want that person working on your brain. You want the person who, no, I'm good at one thing. And so if there's 99 other things I'm not good at or I'm mediocre at, that's fine. I can tell you all the other people. So when people come to me and say, hey, Grant, you know something about publishing, or you know something about webinars, you know something about courses, or you know something about online marketing or funnels or email marketing or any of that stuff. Like, yeah, but there's plenty of other people I'm happy to point to and say, hey, if you want help with speaking, I want to be your go-to resource, versus trying to be all things for all people. Like that just doesn't work.
When you talk about my family doctor, I immediately thought about Dr. Jose. And I thought there are not many things I'll trust Dr. Jose with. Brain surgery would definitely not be one of them.
That's funny.
One of the things that I have heard you talk about in the podcast, and it's a process that I've gone through, and I have a lot of friends trying to go through and massively struggling with, is this, figuring out what their lane is, or finding their niche, as a lot of people talk about. To me, I've been public speaking for many years, so it was always going to be something, either public speaking by itself or something that makes up public speaking, and I ended up settling on storytelling. But for a lot of people that I'm talking to, they got leadership in their head, for example, which is kind of a vague, broad subject. And they are struggling to figure out what's their thing. I mean, how do you tend to help people figure that out?
Yeah, so there's two sides of the equation. There is who you speak to, and then on the other side of the equation is what is the problem that you solve. And so most people are clear on one or the other, and the opposite one is very, very vague to them, right? So I know I want to speak to real estate agents, but I have no idea what I could speak to them about. Or I know I want to speak to college students, but no idea what to speak about. Or I know I want to speak about Facebook advertising, but I have no idea who I should target. I know one side of the equation, but not the other. And one of the best ways to kind of get started with that is to really start with what you know and what your experience has been. So I'll give you an example just from my own story. So my background was I actually, in high school, I was really involved in my local church, and my youth pastor had a big impact on my life. And so I wanted to do that. I was like, I want to be a youth pastor. That he made a big impact for me. I want to do that for other students. And so that was kind of the path I was on. So I worked at a local church as a youth pastor. It gave me a lot of opportunities to speak. And speaking was one of those things I really enjoyed. And so because I spent a lot of time working with students, then it was a natural transition to say, okay, if I want to speak, then who do I speak to? Well, who do I know? What's the world that I'm familiar with and that I come from? But speaking to students. And so that's really how I got my start, was speaking to high school students, because there's a world I already knew, versus if I said, okay, I want to go speak to, corporate CEOs, but like I've never been a corporate CEO. I don't know anything about what that world is like. It's going to be difficult. I think the challenge that a lot of people have with it is they feel like, when you're making a decision about who you speak to and what's the problem that you solve, we feel it's a very important decision, but we feel like we're making a permanent decision, which is not the case. And so what I mean by that is that people feel like, okay, if this is who I decide that I'm going to speak to, and this is what I'm going to speak about, and this is the problem that I'm going to solve, that is the only audience I can ever speak to forever and ever and ever. That's the only topic I can ever talk about forever and ever and ever. And so we put almost too much pressure on ourselves to get it right. And it's important to get it right, but also recognize, again, you're not making a permanent decision. You're not getting a tattoo. If you decide to change, if you decide to pivot, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, a lot of speakers over the course of their career would say, okay, I'm going to to be speaking on this because that's what I know and I'm passionate about and familiar with. And then over time, maybe I'll pivot to something else. And again, just kind of looking at my own career and my trajectory, I did a lot with high school students for a long time, and then had a lot of opportunities speaking to college students, speaking to teachers and parents, and then had opportunities to speak to in corporations and associations. And then today, the speaking that we do is largely for entrepreneurs and those who are interested in speaking. And so even my own speaking career over the last 12 years or so is not like you made a decision on day one and that's what you're stuck with forever and ever and ever. Like you can pivot and evolve, but you need to pick something and be moving towards something versus like, well, if I'm going to pivot and evolve over time, why don't I just try to do everything? Like that doesn't work. You're not going to get any traction doing that way. So it is important that you ultimately decide like, okay, this is who I'm going to help. This is what I'm going to speak about. And then over time, if I need to pivot or adjust, that's fine, but I need to pick a starting point.
And what are your thoughts on qualifications and things of that nature? Let me just give you a tiny bit of context here. So most of the public speaking I had done before was things like Toastmasters, right? So I took part in competitions and I won some stuff. And, once I started trying to move professionally, I thought, okay, well, I was a national champion of public speaking. So, maybe I should put that somewhere. But I have a lot of friends who got into their heads that sort of thing is very important, that if they don't win something at national level or European level or whatever, then they don't have anything to show for when they try to present themselves as a speaker. But listening to you, listening and reading your story and a whole bunch of other speakers I've heard on your show and others, that doesn't seem to be the case. That most people don't have awards or some specific qualification that lets them speak about things.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And so there's there's a couple sides of that equation there. One is going to be, are you qualified just to be a speaker? And the reality is, like you said, most people I know haven't won any award. They're just either good speakers or they've worked at it. And the reality is like the way you become a better speaker is you speak. It's no different than anything else. The way you become a better podcaster is that you podcast. The way you become a better writer is that you write. The way you become better at playing a sport is that you play that sport, right? And so the same thing is true with speaking. You don't necessarily have to say, have some type of certification or won some type of award in order to be, this person's qualified to be a speaker now. Like, I don't think that that's the case at all. And the other side of the equation, though, would be what is the nature of the topic that you speak about, or what's the problem that you solve? And are you qualified to talk about that? Because that is certainly something to consider. But I also think that there's kind of this myth of the expert mentality that in order to be a speaker on a topic, if you said, okay, I want to speak about, Facebook ads or Facebook marketing or something, but I'm not the expert at it. I know plenty of people who know more about it than I do, but realize like you don't have to be the world's greatest expert on that in order for others to perceive you as an expert. So I'll give you an analogy. Like whenever I know nothing about cars, I'm completely clueless with cars. So when I take my car to the local mechanic to have the oil change or have it worked on or something, whoever's working on my car, to me, that person is the expert. Why? Because they know more about cars than I do. Now, does that mean that they are the world's greatest expert on cars? No, I know that. They know that. But I'm not looking for the world's greatest expert on cars. I'm looking for the one person who knows more about cars than I do. And so to me, that person is the expert. I view them as the expert. And so really expertise is kind of in the eye of the beholder. And so if you're going, well, there's plenty of people who know more about that thing than I do. But if it's something that you're knowledgeable on and something that you have some experience with and something that the audience views you as the expert, then that's what expertise is. And so it's less about you getting like hung up on other people knowing more about it. Than there's always going to be people that know more about it than you do. And that's okay. But that doesn't take away from your own expertise or knowledge that you can share with an audience.
It's interesting that we don't take that mentality to anything else we do in life. I mean, most of us a lot of people who are wanting to be a speaker have a different career. There's other things that they're doing now. And I don't think any of them think of themselves as the greatest lawyer or the greatest accountant. But when it comes to speaking, perhaps because it's going to be in front of an audience or something along those lines, because perhaps your payment per gig tends to be higher than what you would get sometimes in a month doing other jobs. But it's interesting that we don't feel that way about any other activity we do in life.
Yep.
Another thing which I get a lot from my friends, because I know a lot of people from the competitive public speaking world and not the professional public speaking world, is this concern about how amazing they need to be as speakers to actually speak professionally. And there are some professional speakers that are absolutely fantastic. I mean, I think you had Scott Stratton on the show the other day, and he's amazing. And I've seen plenty of guys be mind-blowing on stage. But I've also seen a lot of people that I saw on stage and thought, okay, that's good content, but why are you dancing backwards and forwards? And why are your hands doing that? And why are you umming and ahhing left, right, and center? When we are so used to picking apart those things when we're judging performance in competitive public speaking.
Yep.
But I get the feeling again that this is significantly more in the eyes of the person creating obstacles for doing it than in whoever's going to pay you to do it or the audience.
I'll give you my 2 cents on like Toastmasters in general. It sounds like that's a bit of a world that you may be familiar with. And so I think one of the things I mentioned before is that the way you get better as a speaker is you speak and you have at bats and you have reps. And so Toastmasters gives you a lot of those reps. You have a chance to stand in front of an audience and present and speak. The thing I don't like about Toastmasters is I think it can cause speakers to be very, very robotic and formulaic. And I like that everything is done with intention and purpose, but I think it's really easy to overdo it to the point that it feels like sometimes you see like some of the world's greatest Toastmaster trained speakers, and it feels like it's just a robot up there. And so one thing I always remind our speakers is, listen, you are a human talking to a collection of other humans, so act like a human. Now, does that mean that you just need to, I just kind of like willy-nilly? No. Like, you need to be polished, you need to be prepared, you need to be ready, you need to rehearse, you need to take it, you need to treat it like a professional. But I think it's easy to sometimes get so deep in your own head where, okay, I'm supposed to say this line, and then I take 5 steps this way, and then I raise my hand like this, and I did and it's just like, is that how you are in real life? Because that seems annoying. And it's almost like, again, because someone's so deep in their own head regurgitating a script, it's like, you're not even here right now. Like part of being a speaker is just being engaged and fully present with the audience and what is happening. Now, the other thing I would say is that it's kind of like movies or music, in that there are going to be types of speakers or a style of speaking that's really going to resonate with some people and is going to be a complete turnoff to other people. Like, why is it that some people will be like, such and such is the greatest movie ever, and other people are like, I didn't even like it. It's like, how is it that we watched the same movie and had 2 totally different impressions? So how is it that the same thing is true with speakers? Like, some people will see a speaker and be like, that was the best speaker I've ever seen. And other people are like, yeah, they're all right. So sometimes it's going to be a little bit of different strokes for different folks type of thing. But I think what's important for speakers listening to understand is that it's important for you to be you up on stage and to be authentically you and not try to be someone else. I saw, Tony Robbins do this on stage and people liked it, and therefore I have to do it. Or I saw someone deliver this joke and they got a laugh, so therefore I have to tell that joke. Like, don't do that. If it works for someone else, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. It doesn't mean it should work for you. And so you need to be authentic. You need to be genuine. The audience can sense that. And so it's really, really important to lean into that versus trying to be something that you're not on stage.
One of the things about Toastmasters that, having been part of it for almost a decade now, you notice a lot as soon as you step out of it, is there is a lot of focus. There's too much focus on delivery and not so much on content. Mm-hmm. And there's also this thing, which I think it's a slightly more American thing, but it's in Toastmasters everywhere because Toastmasters is very American. It's the theatricality of it.
Yeah.
I have to try to describe to people when I'm trying to fix that, to say, you're talking to your friends at a bar, you're not on Broadway. Yes. So it's not, when I woke up in that morning, something happened.
Yes.
Right? It's like, Hamlet, put down the skull, right?
Right.
You don't need to do that. But yeah, again, as you said, it's at bats. And I think for a lot of people that I've worked with, trying to get them as better as a speaker, they say, what should I do? I said, well, the very first thing you should do is join Toastmasters, because that would be a chance to speak 2, 3, 4 times a month.
Yes.
At a supportive audience that will let you try whatever content you want to try. But where are you going to do that if you don't have a club or something like that? It's just way harder. So ignore the nonsense and the bits that are never going to translate, but get the practice in.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like I said, when people ask me about Toastmasters, I tell them like there are thousands of Toastmaster chapters all over the world. So go find one. Because the other thing is like each one's going to be slightly different, and some you could go to a couple different ones, and one might be like, man, this is perfect, and other be like, it's just not what I'm looking for. Which is fine. Like try a couple of them and figure out which one resonates with you. And like you said, Francisco, it's good to just get the practice and get at bats and reps in, because it's hard to find those opportunities as a speaker sometimes.
Something you said in the book that I find almost mysterious is this idea about working with what you have. So I think this is when you talk about the things that everybody needs. Then everybody needs a website, they need a video, but then I've had people on the podcast and I've spoken to other people and listened to yours, and the stories about new speakers almost always involve a horribly crap video that is not even about them talking about the thing they're talking about. Or I spoke to someone, I know James Taylor very well, a guy I mentioned to you when we spoke originally, and he didn't have a video. He had a PDF with a picture of him on stage and saying, this is what I talk about. Yeah. And what surprises me about that is, yeah, fine, that works for us. It makes sense that you would work with what you have. What surprises me is that companies will sometimes hire speakers and not pay them little money in some cases on the basis of that type of promotional material. Mm-hmm. So I would understand if they just said, okay, sure, we'll hire you, but we'll pay you the lowest fee we'll pay any speaker. But that doesn't seem to be the case sometimes. So do you have any idea why that happens?
As far as like why either clients wouldn't consider paying a speaker, or why they would offer,
why would an event planner look at a speaker's materials, look at the website and look at the video, and they'll clearly be able to tell, okay, well, this video is this guy shooting this thing on the backyard or whatever, but they will still hire speakers on that basis.
Yeah.
Do they just have a much less superficial eye to what works and what doesn't than perhaps we do when we're trying to evaluate if our stuff is good enough to put it out there?
Yeah. So when it comes to the demo video in general, what we always say is to work with what you've got, do it with excellence, and improve as you go. And so whenever it comes to especially the demo video, think of the demo video kind of like a movie trailer. Before anybody would go see a movie, we typically want to see a trailer, and a trailer that, they take a movie that's 90 minutes or 2 hours and they boil it down to 2 or 3 minutes. And within those 2 or 3 minutes, you have an idea of who's in it, what's the plot, what's the theme. And the point of a movie trailer and the point of a demo video is to make people want to see more. So you got to remember that event planners are in the risk mitigation business. So anytime that they hire a speaker and they put that speaker up on stage, they are taking a risk. Everything that person says on, you hand someone a microphone and you put them in front of your audience, anything and everything that person says reflects back on the event planner. So if they are amazing on stage, then the event planner looks like the hero. If they say something inappropriate, or they're rude, or they're just a bad speaker, or they just do a poor job, then that also reflects negatively back on the event planner. And so event planners, because they want to remove that risk, oftentimes they want to see some type of demo video. And so we think that the demo video has to be, this Hollywood movie level production. And if you have that, great, but most speakers don't have that. It's real easy to compare what you have as far as your website and your video to what other speakers have. And remember that every speaker starts from zero. Every speaker, any speaker you look up to, you admire, you respect, all of them started with their best attempt at a video. All of them started with their best attempt at a website. And again, they worked with what they had and they improved as they went. And so I think about like my very first demo video was footage of me. I spoke at a local church youth group. I spoke to as a friend of mine who's the youth pastor there. I spoke for probably 30 minutes to a group of about 30 people or so. I borrowed a little handy cam, put on the side of the room. It was dark. The lighting was bad. The audio was bad. The acoustics were bad. It wasn't great. But it worked, right? I did it with excellence. And it was enough that an event planner could look at and say like, okay, obviously not the best quality footage, but I can tell that this guy is a good speaker and would do a good job for our event. And so each time I would speak, then I would get more footage and better footage and improved footage and could make a better demo video and then a better demo video. And so fast forward to today, and we're on probably our 6th or 7th iteration of a demo video. And now we have really, really good footage, but that's because we've been doing it for a long time, and we've also had some really crappy footage that we've used over the time. And so what I would recommend for speakers is not well, I'm just gonna, kind of hold up my phone and selfie mode and be like, hey, I'm Grant, I'm a speaker, you should hire me. Like, don't do that. That doesn't work. Like, people are hiring you to speak, and so that's what they want to see. They want to see an example of you actually speaking. But you want to make sure that if you let's say you don't have some type of footage, it presents like this chicken egg situation. I need footage in order to get gigs, and I need gigs in order to get footage. What do I do then? One of the things you could do is you could speak to an empty room. Now, if you're going to do this in some type of setting where someone's going to actually hire you. Like, nobody's hiring you to speak in your backyard or your kitchen or your living room. So don't record a video there. Like, go to a theater, an auditorium, a banquet hall, a ballroom, like some type of setting where someone would actually hire you to speak and film something there, in the type of setting where someone's watching that and they're trying to envision, like, yeah, I could see hiring this person. I could see how this person would do a good job for our event. So that can absolutely work for a speaker. I've also heard from speakers who said they never had a demo video for the first year or so. So I think hypothetically you could do that. Wouldn't be my first vote, because again, because event planners are in that risk mitigation business, a lot of them want to see something that just gives them some comfort and confidence that if I hire this speaker, that they're going to do a good job. If I hire them, that they're not going to embarrass me, right? And so that's why that video and the website are so important.
I think that now we are, a lot of the world is locked down.
Yeah.
The line you said about they're not hiring you to speak in your bedroom or your backyard might be slightly different nowadays. If this thing goes on for much longer, then you are speaking from your bedroom. It's just the neutral wall of your bedroom.
And so let me give an example to that, because like at the time of this recording, we're still in this weird COVID world, and who knows how long we're going to be here. And so we've seen a lot of speakers who are, because live events for the most part aren't happening because of the just requirements of everyone kind of keeping their distance from one another. Then we're seeing a lot of speakers who are transitioning to virtual speaking and virtual opportunities, right? And we're seeing that there's a lot of opportunity with that. There's a lot of upside with virtual speaking. And so if you're going to do that, then I think, again, a demo video and a website that reflects that is also still really important, because just because you're a speaker doesn't necessarily mean that people won't know that you're a virtual speaker. And just because someone can watch a video of you standing on stage delivering a great talk doesn't necessarily mean that you can deliver a great talk, sitting at your home talking to a camera in an empty room. And so it's different context. So showing examples of this is what it's like to work with me, and this is how I interact with your audience, and this is how I can deliver in a virtual setting is important, especially if you want to be booking virtual gigs.
This is actually the exact approach I've taken with mine, because I had good footage, but I didn't have good footage of me talking about storytelling. Mm-hmm. So I'm putting one together now, and I have some really crap footage. But then I tried to build that into. I said, stories work even if you're talking in a dark church, and this is me talking with like a mosaic window behind me, or they work if you're locked at home talking to a screen. Yes. And then it's me talking to a screen. But yeah, no, I fully see that. And I think that, again, with like a lot of things with people that are trying to get started, perhaps we judge all of these things that we're trying to do. We judge some things too harshly, and we don't judge others harshly enough. Yeah. So I know people that think that I don't need a website, I'm on LinkedIn. It's like,
right.
Just get a website, just get a presence there.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be any type of fancy site. Like, it can just be like a one-page website that gives some information about you. But like, especially in this day and age, like if you don't have a website, it's hard for people to take you seriously. And like you said, if someone says, well, I got a LinkedIn page, or I got a Facebook page, or I got a YouTube channel, it's like, that's fine. But people at the end of the day want to see, they want a website. And so it's important to have one.
There's something I remember from the book. You described a situation where, I think the situation was that you delivered a speech and you felt it went well and everybody enjoyed it and was laughing. But then the school principal came up to you to say that I don't think you hadn't done the things you had agreed to do, or you hadn't covered something. And I think you had this conversation, or I heard Scott have this conversation either with you or with someone, might have been with Jay Bear. Mm-hmm. And he said something that had me thinking. He was talking about that he was doing one of his rants, and then he said, I was giving the audience what they needed or what they wanted, but I didn't give them what the client wanted me to give them.
Yeah.
And I had a question to you about what are your thoughts on balancing, servicing the client, who is not the audience, is the person who hires you, with your integrity, or your integrity with the message? Is that ever a problem where you have to think, okay, well, this message needs this thing, but I can't say this thing because the client will get massively annoyed with me if I say it?
Yeah. So I always want to, and I think every speaker is going to be a little bit different. I know some speakers who kind of have the mentality and approach of like, I'm going to get up there, I'm going to have the mic, I'm going to say whatever I want, and the audience and the event planner can just deal with it. I tend to not be like that. I'm a safe choice for event planners because I want to, they've hired me and I'm there in service of them and of the audience. And so I want to do what they have asked me to do. And a lot of this has already been, it's not like I'm just, they're like, hey, come speak on anything and everything. Like all this has been discussed ahead of time. So even in the process of being hired in the first place, tell me about the event, tell me about the audience. What are the challenges that they're running into? What would you be looking for a speaker to talk about? So I know going into it, something about the event. Now, there have been times, I remember one time, this was several years ago, I was at a conference and I was sitting on the front row with the event planner, and I'm getting ready to go up and speak in a few minutes, and I'm just kind of watching the session unfold. And so I kind of lean over to the event planner and said, "Hey, initially we had talked about me speaking on this topic, X topic, but the more I'm here, the more I think that Y topic, this other talk that I have, I think could be a better fit. Are you cool if I do that presentation and that talk instead?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure, that'd be awesome." And they really appreciated it. And me just clearing it by them versus me hopping up and giving a presentation that they're like, "Wait a minute, this doesn't sound familiar to what I was hoping they're going to be speaking about." Right. So just being on the same page. So it's kind of like a couple years ago, the house that we live in, we built. And so, if we worked with I guess somewhat of an interior designer on parts of it and thinking through, paint colors, for example. And if we said, okay, we want this paint color in this room, and then the painter comes in and paints it a totally different color, and it's just like, hey, I put paint on there. You wanted me to put paint on there? I know you wanted this color. I personally thought this other color would look better, so I just went ahead and went with that. Like, as the homeowner, like, we'd be ticked. We're like, no. Like, what we paid for is for you to do this, right? And so it's important that, again, for like in this situation, like with a painter, for example, they may be able to, or an interior designer, they may be able to communicate up front, hey, I think this color looks better, but if you want to do that color, that's totally fine, and I'm happy to do that, right? That's the same type of approach that a speaker should have of, hey, I think potentially that, this could be a better topic based on what you're describing. But I also think, like, most of the time and most of the experience, and I've had hundreds of interactions with clients, the most of the time they are looking to you, the speaker, as kind of the expert. All right, based on what you know about our event, based on what you know about our audience, and based on what you know about our situation, what we're looking for, what do you recommend? Right? It's kind of like going to a restaurant and sitting down, a restaurant you've never been before, and the waiter asking, "What do you want?" And you're just kind of like, "What do you recommend? What's good?" Because you know all the menu items. Like, I just walked in the door, but you've tasted these things, and you know what would be potentially, like, if you say, "Hey, do you want a burger or a salad, or do you want something that's more sweet or something that's more salty? Or how hungry are you?" And then, okay, well, based on all that, here's what I'd recommend. A lot of times people are going to go with that because they know the menu, they know what the items are. And so the same thing is true for a speaker. It's pretty rare for an event planner to be like, "Hey, we really want you to do this topic," even though it has nothing to do with what we think it does. So you absolutely want to make sure that you understand that as a speaker, you are there for the client, you're there for the audience. And I typically don't recommend or take the approach of kind of a cavalier approach of like, just get up on stage and do whatever I want to. Like, that's not what you're there for. You're there to serve the client and the audience.
And talking about audiences, because you've spoken to, as you mentioned earlier, a broad range of different audiences. And I'm familiar with most of those, but what I've never done was speak to college students or high school students, since I was one. What are those audiences like?
They're great audiences. They're tough audiences, but they're great audiences. And one of the things I really like about them is they are they're very genuine. They're very potentially difficult audiences. So when you're speaking to, let's say, like a business audience, most of the time they're going to be relatively polite. They'll give you a little courtesy laugh if something's really not that funny, and they'll kind of mostly stay engaged. But for if you're speaking to, a bunch of 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are maybe have shorter attention spans, who if it's not funny, they're not going to laugh. And it's not that they're a mean audience or a bad audience, but it just means like you got to be on your game. You got to be sharp. And so it forces you as a speaker, I think, to become a better speaker. And so I've always kind of felt like, man, if you can do a good job speaking to a high school or college audience, you can do a good job speaking to most audiences because it really forces you to be a good speaker. So yeah, they're fun audiences for sure, but they can be challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. I try to remember my days in high school, and the one thing we didn't have was tolerance for anything we perceived to be nonsense or just not entertaining. I mean, if we could boo the school principal and get away with it, we would have many times over. So I can only imagine that if you got 300 school kids in the same room and you're trying to be funny, you know exactly if you're being funny or not.
Yep, you do, which is good. You get that immediate real feedback that you can tell if you're doing a good job or not.
Fair enough. And the last question I have for you is: are you missing the stage already?
I had been a full-time speaker for several years. I was doing 60, 70 gigs a year, and my business model has certainly shifted and changed now, where I do a couple gigs here and there, but not nearly as much as I used to. So right now it's not dramatically different for me in that I wasn't doing a ton of, I do a lot more virtual speaking now. And so in that sense, it still kind of scratches the itch. But I love helping speakers. I love working with speakers and at all different stages of their own career and their business. And so what we get to do now is really fulfilling and rewarding.
If people want to find more about you and what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, everything we do is over at thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com. We got a podcast by the same name, the Speaker Lab Podcast. We have nearly 300 episodes there, so definitely worth checking out. Also, the new book that you mentioned touched on The Successful Speaker, 5 steps for booking gigs, getting paid, and building your platform. So if you want to go dig deeper on anything we've covered and talked about today, definitely check out your copy of The Successful Speaker.
Grant, thank you very much, mate. It's been a pleasure. And let's hope. You don't mind too much the not being on stage anytime soon, but let's hope at least we can go outside.
Indeed,
hug our friends at some point in the near future.
Very true, very true. Thanks for the time, Francisco. I really enjoyed it. It was fun.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves, and until next time.